We will never turn our back on a single Scot.
We've got to wrestle with those challenges.
This is the same nonsense we have heard time and time again.
This is our country. Let's fix it together.
Hello and welcome to a special budget edition of Planet Holyrood. I'm Paul Hutcheon, political editor of the Daily Record, joined today by two guests, Ben Borland, who's the editor of the Scottish Daily Express, and a man who needs no introduction, Mark Smith, the head of news at the Daily Record.
But you gave me one anyway.
Yeah, a man who, basically either spikes my tails or gives them a good show. So he's a great man, So, look, yesterday, the Finance Secretary, Shona Robison, delivered her pre-election budget. I'll just go through the shopping list of highlights or lowlights, depending on your political perspective. £40 a week Scottish child payment for babies. Modest income tax relief by raising some of the income tax thresholds. But of course, the thresholds at the other end of the scale were frozen. A mansion tax, a private jet tax, breakfast clubs in every primary school, and fairly tight settlements for local government and health. So let's start with the social justice stuff. Smitty, I think it'd be fair to say the Record is fully behind the £40 a week policy for under ones. It's interesting because, the Record has been very supportive of the Scottish Child Payment, which is just over £27 a week for all eligible kids just now. John Swinney said last year that he didn't agree with big rises because he felt like it would maybe damage work incentives. So we weren't really expecting a big rise. But what he's done, quite a clever thing, he's targeted it at babies. That was a big budget ask of Save the Children, who wanted a more targeted intervention. It seems like a decent policy helping low-income families at a time when they need it the most.
I credit where it's due. I think with an eye on the election, clearly, John Swinney and Shona Robison have come up with a policy there that most people would think is both important in terms of tackling child poverty, which all governments always say that's their main priority, and the SNP have been saying it for many years. This is something that can go a long way towards tackling childhood poverty. It's also, in my view, a good way to help redistribute wealth. I mean, a lot of young mums, a lot of young parents are out there struggling for cash. This is a way to get money in their pockets, and I think it sounds eminently sensible. Obviously, there will be people who are opposed to it. People who like killing babies, or people who might be opposed to it if they're fans of King Herod. But apart from that small cohort, I think most people would certainly be in favour of it.
Ben, surely even you must think it's a good idea.
After that intro, it's not so much the payment itself. I mean, I do think it's a big increase, and it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money that people get. I think the problem I have, and a lot of our readers have, is with the overall benefits bill and the overall direction, which is, I think, are we heading towards a £10 billion devolved benefits bill? It's who pays for these.
We do, you and me.
Well, we do, yeah, but exactly that's the point. We're not growing the economy to pay for these. We're just adding more and more taxes, which is actually having the effect of stifling the economy. So I would argue the best way to get young mums and young parents more money is to get them better jobs, is to improve the economy, get people back into work.
Even when their kids are 6, 8 months. I mean, a lot of parents will be on maternity leave, paternity leave. This is a way of boosting their incomes at that particular moment in time.
Where mums get straight onto the fields with the kids on their back straight away. Maybe we could try that system here. That'd be an advance.
Only one parent gets maternity leave. The mum gets maternity leave. Dad is back at work after 2 weeks. So the best way to get money into that household is to improve dad's wages, isn't to improve mum's wages.
That parent is probably already working full time. I mean, is the father or the mother
probably? I mean, that's quite a bold statement.
Supposed to be, taking on a second job. Just at a time when young parents need the most support. I think it's good
to get parents into work, though. If anything, it's an incentive to keep parents out of work. Because
I think though in this case, I get your point. I mean, economic growth is vital, and by the way, it's also vital that we get wage growth. I think, and I'm glad to hear someone on the right argue for better wages. Maybe we should all join a trade union and get more wages and take money out of businesses that way, for sure. But this is the first year of life. All studies have shown that that first year of life is vital for a kid's chances in later life. If that 40 quid just makes that wee bit of difference, and that kid can eat better, maybe have better housing options, then I think we will see the economic benefit of that as well in the future if that kid gets the right start.
Just to be clear, you're talking about wages and how it's about getting them into work. I mean, so would you support like a £15 an hour minimum wage?
I mean, I think, again,
people in the centre right say it's all about work, but they're always the ones who are trying not to increase the living wage and the minimum wage.
But you can't increase minimum wages until the economy grows. That's what it's all about. It's not about increasing wages. It's about growing the economy. The old expression, a rising tide lifts all boats. A growing economy will lift wages. A growing economy will put more money into young parents' pockets.
It sounds like what you're saying is a recipe for throwing young parents into the clutches of employers and the misery of low-paid work.
I mean, I'm not saying I'm against this particular policy. What I'm saying is it's just adding to the huge devolved benefits bill, which Scots taxpayers already pay for benefits on a UK-wide level. These are extra benefits that aren't available, obviously, in other parts of the UK and have to be paid for. And it's finding that balance between helping people and making sure kids aren't going hungry and babies have got the clothes that they need and they can be kept warm at night, and ensuring that it's a good place to do business. It's a good place where companies want to invest and where wealth creators and people who want to set up a company are encouraged to do that. And I think the balance is all wrong. The balance is far too far towards the benefit side of the equation and not towards let's get more taxpayers in. Let's bring in some more top-rate taxpayers.
But this particular benefit, which is paid to families in receipt of universal credit, many of whom are actually working, surely this is one of those ones that very much tips in the balance of it's a benefit to the whole of society if these kids get a good start in life. And sadly, most businesses, their motive is profit, purely profit. And they don't care if their employees' kids are going hungry or don't have clothes on their backs. That's where I think the Scottish Government's doing the right thing here, stepping in.
I mean, it was interesting. I think what you said there about it's paid, it's a means-tested benefit because it's tied to universal credit. So again, the problem with all these benefits are that there is a poverty trap at the end of them where it doesn't pay to push yourself out of that because you're going to lose your £40 a week for your under one, your £27.
Huge proportion of people on benefits are in work because their employers are not paying them enough.
Yeah. Well, but then again, we come back to the fact if the economy grows, wages grow.
Sounds like trickle down to me. You know, if the economy goes, then the people at the bottom will just magically become better off. We've heard that for about 40 years. It's never happened.
Yeah, but economics is a good thing. That's
poverty was reduced because of Labour policies like the minimum wage, tax credits, and the Scottish Child Payment is very much in that sphere. It's the government intervening to make sure that people got more money in their pockets. It's not a substitute for wages. In many cases, the Scottish Child Payment will top up their wages. But if you simply leave it to the market and employers, those child poverty will never go down.
I mean, one thing I'm in favour of, I do think we should be encouraging people to have children and have families. I think that, we are globally facing a bit of a population crisis with depopulation and falling fertility rates. I think that's quite a good thing. I'm not arguing against this. I just think, the other aspect of the entire, I know we'll discuss this more later, the entire budget is that it's a pre-election budget. And this £40 for kids under one, if it's such a good idea this year, why was it not a good idea last year or the year before? But I know we're going to discuss that.
The second sort of social justice type, but I think we'll maybe all agree in this one, just in terms of the politics, breakfast club. So 2021, the SNP say in their manifesto that they're going to provide free school breakfasts to every primary school pupil. They completely failed on that. They didn't deliver it. And now in yesterday's budget, Shona Robison stands up and promises breakfast clubs in every primary school by August 2027. I mean, does she think that we're zipped up the back? You know, she said this before. They failed.
It didn't happen.
Didn't happen. And now they're presenting it as something new.
Mm.
It's just, I mean, that's cynical politics. And it's based on this idea that people don't follow these things that closely, and they've probably forgotten what was in the SNP manifesto, but people should remind.
That's why you're here, mate.
Exactly.
Yeah, no,
But it does seem pretty shoddy to me.
Yeah, I think, as Ben says, election year budget, they're doing things that they can wave a flag about and say, look at us, look how nice we are, look how good we are. And, but these promises have got to be met. And let's keep a close eye on that after the election to see if all this singing and dancing actually becomes a real policy and it actually does end up happening. And obviously we'll be holding that to account on that, I think.
I think as well, obviously, the child benefit, it's directly in the hands of Social Security Scotland. So, it can be done. We know it can be done because, the money just pours out of that office in Dundee at a rate of water going over the Niagara Falls. The breakfast clubs must be provided by councils and schools. So it's an extra burden on councils.
Well, see, the wording is funding to deliver breakfast clubs.
Ring-fenced funding.
Well, it's almost like, the Scottish Government's preparing to say, well, we've made the funding available, the ball's in the court of the councils now. So they're sort of creating the sort of circumstances in which to blame local authorities.
And the councils say, well, it's not enough. And is that funding enough to provide a breakfast club in every school 5 days a week?
Bet you £1 million that we're not going to have breakfast clubs in every primary school by August 2027.
You say bet £1 million?
Bet £1 million, that's like half my pension, so quite happy to give that up.
Gold-plated.
But no, it's not going to happen. I mean, the SNP government is brilliant at making the announcement, getting the headlines, and just not following through.
Maybe they could borrow the money off the under ones. They're going to be minted.
Leave the under ones alone. That's the one area that I'll give them credit on. So speaking of councils, another flagship policy that they announced in the budget was this idea of a mansion tax. So for homes that are worth in excess of £1 million, there's going to be 2 extra council tax bands. Now, Smitty, as a man of the left, I would imagine that the principle of this is music to your ears.
Love it.
But, the more I look at the detail of this, the more it just seems pretty insubstantial. So I think in the current financial year, we've raised about over 3 billion in council tax. This one policy is going to raise between 12 and 16 million pounds, which is a drop in the ocean. And I did a story this morning, COSLA, I got a leaked letter, basically saying that the cost of the revaluation for these 2 bands is going to cost 10 million. So if you subtract the revenue raised from the cost of it, it may only actually raise an extra £2 million in the early years.
Here's an idea. See, when they're doing the revaluation, let's not have 2 extra bands. Let's go right up to Z and have everybody who's got a massively expensive house going right up there. I mean, we've got houses in Scotland that super homes selling for millions and millions of pounds. Let's get these people properly taxed for the cost of the value of their property, and let's have the bands going right up. And if you're going to do a re-evaluation, let's re-evaluate properly right up to the top £5-6 million, like up to Balmoral, right, and make everybody pay more. And by the way, I don't care if it raises 2 pence or £20 billion. I like to see these people pay more because they can afford it, and it's a principle. I don't care how much it raises.
I think though, if we're going to go down that road, it shouldn't be used to fund councils, because ultimately, whether you live in Balmoral or whether you live in a small house in Ballater, you're using the same council services.
That's a good point.
If we're going to restructure property tax, it should probably go into paying for the child payment.
I agree. I think there has to be a mechanism.
Oh, wait a minute, there's an agreement.
No way, this is a first. But I do agree. I think if you're going to properly tax property, doing it locally has problems, because Edinburgh, which is one of the richest cities in Europe,
that as well, yeah.
has most of the £1 million plus homes. You'll not get many homes of that sort, maybe in maybe North Lanarkshire, or North Ayrshire. Now, there should be a mechanism whereby the benefit from this tax is spread evenly among all local authorities.
Yeah, but if it's only raising 16 million, you distribute that nationally. It's like peanuts.
I mean, not if you have bands going all the way up.
The other thing is the government, I think I'm right in saying, are still in the middle of a consultation about reforming council tax. And councils...
They're not going to touch it with a barge pole.
I think I saw Glasgow Council wants 14 bands. A lot of the councils want 14. But so it's almost like they've, in the middle of a consultation, they've just gone, actually, we'll just put 2 in. So what?
I think this is a process. I'm glad they've understood the principle that if you've got a big, massive house that's worth a fortune, you should pay more for local goods and services. They've recognised that as a fundamental principle. That's the start of this journey. The end of it should be King Charlie paying us $3 million a year for his.
I still go back to, though, whether you live in a castle or a shoebox, you get the same services from your council.
Don't care. Let the rich pay more.
Okay. I know what you mean, but my view on this is the same as it is for the top rate of tax, income tax, which is now 48%. You're not going to build a socially just society in the backs of a small number of rich people. I mean, genuine redistribution is when you actually take money off folk in the middle, because that's where the cash is. You're not going to raise. I mean, you might not agree with doing, but that's where the money is. You're not going to raise a huge amount of money with a mansion tax or increasing the top rate of income tax, because people will move away.
I think that's true. As a matter of principle, I think people on less than 20 grand a year shouldn't pay any income tax. And I think as a matter of principle, you should put that burden onto the people who earn a decent wage. But then it creates a far more equal But
it's not an equal society, because there's a growing number of people who are doing nothing and just being paid for it.
What, you mean the rich, you mean?
No, I mean the people
that have loads of houses that they're in and all that.
No, I mean, well, they've worked for it,
No, they've inherited it most of the time.
Some have inherited it, but someone's worked for it.
But the people who are really
to redistribute it, there's got to be work involved. You can't just go, all right, I'm now earning 20, 30, 40,000 pounds a year off the state for doing nothing.
Most of the wealth in society, isn't actually earned. Most of it's sitting there in big offshore accounts or in big bank accounts or in property, and it's inherited and it's there, and the state can't get any access to it. If we are going to tax income, however, that seems to be the main. We need a wealth tax as well, by the way. But if we're going to tax income, I think there's definitely a case for having poorer people paying less.
See, I disagree totally with what you said there, Paul. I'm not against taxing the mega rich. I think, though, the middle earners are taxed enough.
No, what I meant was that if the argument is that you want to raise a lot of resources to pay for social justice policies, you're never going to get the money you want through soaking the rich, because there's not that many of them. If you actually want to raise resources, you have to look at the middle. I know you don't want to do that, but just in terms of resources, that's where the cash is.
But the assumption is that you've got to keep raising money to give it to people.
Well, if that's your political perspective,
you don't have to do that.
You don't want to, of course, you don't tax the middle classes until the pipsqueak. But things like mansion taxes and private jet taxes, which incidentally I asked Shona Robison about after the budget. She says she doesn't know how much it's going to raise. She just said that she agreed with it in principle. These are policies that are just about wooing the Greens and trying to get their support for the budget. They're not actually going to transform any person's life. It's things like higher income tax for folk on 50 grand that have probably raised a lot more money than increasing income tax rates on folk earning £500,000.
Like any argument with tax, I think if you look at a specific tax, there's lots of arguments for and against it. I think that, and it's true. A lot of guys, tradesmen, guys working factories, they're on no bad wages, and they've got to get. If the middle earners get taxed more, they will have their take home pay reduced. However, that's where I think a wealth tax comes in, and income alone can't be the only place we look at for taxation.
Yeah,
Property, inherited wealth, just wealth that just sits there in people's accounts. That's where you can start to shift the burden slightly away from middle earners, I think.
The danger, though, is the guy who's got the private jet and the guy who's got the £1 million castle, he's maybe running a company. I know, saying some of them are sort of landed gentry, but others are entrepreneurs who are going to look at this and go, well, actually, I could run my company from the Lake District or Bournemouth or, and move away to another part of the UK and pay less tax. You're not having to be a tax exile. You just...
Well, that's a good point. If we are going to have a higher tax burden, we need to see clear and unequivocal improvements in public services that justify it. I think a lot of guys who run businesses would be happy to stay in Scotland, even if they're mega rich, because maybe their kids got, they're probably sending their kids to private school, but, there's maybe more social justice around, the streets are maybe cleaner, the environment's a wee bit safer. I think a more equitable society is quite attractive
if you could
to high earners.
But I don't think that's it.
The income tax rises were long overdue because for well over a decade, we had this so-called free higher education, so there's no fees. We had free personal care, free this, free that, and no taxes went up. So it all came from the block grants. I just think it was inevitable at some point that income tax was going to rise in order to pay for this. Yeah. I'm not going to call it a freebie state, but
the SNP have been poor on service delivery, and I think that's where their end of the bargain has not been held up. If you're going to tax a plumber and say to him, right, we're going to take more money off you than somebody doing the same job in Carlisle, that guy's got to see better public services as a result.
I think public services are hard to get right.
Yeah.
Giving out benefits are easy. That's why the benefits bill's going up and up, because it's not your responsibility. You just give the money away, and it's up to the individual to then use it in a way that is going to improve their lives. Having the state improve the country and improve people's lives is really, really hard. The SNP plainly haven't been able to do it. They've been able to give away lots and lots of money, but they haven't been able to.
I mean, public services are in a miserable state, and there's no sign that they're going to get any better with this local government settlement. Just on income tax, so what Robison announced, I think we've got a 6-rate income tax system. So the basic and intermediate rates, the threshold was lifted, which gives very modest income tax relief to people you maybe call them low and middle incomes. The higher rate, which is levied on income between 43,663 to 75 grand, that was frozen. So we still have this bizarre anomaly of income between around 43 grand and 50,000 and I think £70 being taxed at 50%. So that was left untouched. I mean, I was a bit surprised that they didn't move on that. I mean, they did lift the lower thresholds.
There was lots of that kind of, people, senior nurses, people who've built a career, who've built their wages up, police officers, teachers. There's a lot of people in that bracket now who were once under Alex Salmond, were once seen as the SNP's core target. They're clearly not anymore. They've been left. And to be honest, if you're in that bracket and you're voting for this shower, then it's your own lookout.
Income tax is a tricky one, though, isn't it? No one really wants to mess around with it too much because it's so visible in people's pay packets.
Yeah. Raising thresholds is a good way, I think, to get money into people's pockets. I think there was a case for raising the threshold for that first bracket above the intermediate, because I think a lot of the SNP's core vote is that working class, lower middle class voter who feels that independence might be good for them, feels that maybe the Scottish government is on their side. It's a tricky one for the SNP if they look like they're basically ripping off that particular.
It was notable. I didn't notice or I didn't hear any of the rhetoric that we've had in previous years about people with broader shoulders being asked to pay a bit more. Because I think if you're in that 44 grand to 50, I don't think you feel like you're the ones with the broader shoulders.
No, and I think raising those thresholds, like roughly with inflation, might be a fairer way to do it. And you're still getting your tax take from those on the higher, the really high brackets.
I mean, let's not forget the difference. I think if 50 grand, let's say, I'm pretty sure the difference in tax is about £1,700 more you pay in Scotland than if you're in England, Wales, or Northern Ireland.
Again, I mean, the people in that bracket, they're not going to starve as a result of paying that money, but they might miss out on a holiday, and that's important for those families. And as I say, I agree that with taxation, I think it should be progressive and it should go up the higher up the pay scale you go, but there has to be that quid pro quo of better public services and just a more equitable society. I'm sure the SNP and Labour would both want that, but it's delivering it as the hard part.
I think, interestingly though, like not raising the high rate threshold and freezing it does leave the door open to an Sarwar, because when I interviewed him on Planet Holyrood, he referred to the 50p rate, which is NI and income tax, as a quirk, and he specifically said that he wanted to address that. So, I mean, John Swinney's kind of conceded that ground. I would expect
it's
an ask to try and
I know. I mean, today I think we're reporting that there's about 108, just over 100,000 people in that who have now been swept up into that higher bracket. They will be, I presume, fairly annoyed about that. And the other point is, the actual gain for the guys at the lower end, is really. I think Labour are saying you'd struggle to buy a Mars bar a week, and that isn't enough of a bonus for these people.
I think if you're on the national living wage, it's £11 a year.
Yeah.
The maximum is £31.75 a year.
Yeah.
So but
trifling amounts.
Those trifling amounts, it feels a bit like a game, so that the SNP can now say again the majority of Scottish taxpayers pay less.
It feels manipulative,
even though the amount that's less now is only, like you say, a Mars bar a week, £11 a year. Is that
or a low fat yogurt? Just for those of us on a New Year diet.
I know that you like them.
Hate them.
Give
me a Mars bar any day, deep fried, hopefully. But anyway, that's a thing in the past.
So let's look ahead to the election. People often talk about politics in elections in terms of the Ming vase theory, that one party's ahead and just they're in possession of the Ming vase, don't drop it. I kind of feel like Swinney's in that position just now, 20-point lead with this budget. Just don't drop the vase, and I don't think he did.
No, I think generally speaking, he got quite good headlines, maybe too good if I'm honest. I think now that day two's around, we're like, oh, hang on a minute, what about this and that? Council tax. The Mars bar that you can gain. I think as the week goes on, maybe the budget won't unravel, but there'll start to be slightly more critical voices about it, I think. And but it's not. I don't think it's going to be a disastrous dropping of the Ming vase. I don't think it's even a dropping in the Marmite jar. It's just, I think
it was pretty uninspiring, really.
Someone described it as boring, but I think that's what he wanted. He didn't want a UK government style budget, and you also have to contrast the run up to the UK government budget with all the leaks, with the fact there was no leaks in the Scottish government budget. So again, they can kind of portray themselves as being competent and the grown-ups in the room. But let's face it, this election, it should be on the SNP's record over the last 5 years, not what happened in the last 24 hours.
Where they might have dropped the ball is on council tax.
Yeah, that's the one loose end, I think.
Councils are getting a poor settlement. They're in quite rebellious mood. Lots of them are Labour controlled. I think we could be in for some eye-watering council tax rises.
When will that be?
So they'll all be set in April, I think,
just before the election.
So drip fed in March. I mean, I remember before Swinney took over as FM, he gave an interview down south, and he was talking about councils and how there was an issue of shared accountability for council decisions. So, for instance, with council tax, of course, it's local authorities that set them, but it's the national government that gets the blame for the rises.
Yeah, that is that.
And so, given that that's his view, I was a bit surprised they didn't go for a cap. It is a hostage to fortune, because I think the average rises were nearly 10% last year. Yeah. And it doesn't seem like councils are flush with cash.
No, but you've made that point before, Paul. The reason for all of this, the reason that council finances are in such dire straits, is because of the council tax freeze.
Chickens coming home to roost.
The hollowed out councils. Although what I would say is, if we are going to see massive council tax rises, let's make sure that councils don't be wasting money on idiotic flagship schemes like the Edinburgh tram extension, for example, which goes up my favourite local path in Roseburn in Edinburgh. Let's get that out the door.
Or big salary rises for their chief executives.
Well, exactly,
I mean, the other thing that's going to happen in April, which again they could have moved on, is the rates revaluation. You know, if your local pub or your favourite local shop closes because the rates have gone up 400% weeks before the election, then you know that could have been tricky. That could have been kicked down the road to next April. But, yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to have been a disaster, and it doesn't seem to have been a great success either. And I think John Swinney will be happy with that.
Yeah, I think they will think he's kind of, with one leap, he was free from his last budget before the election. He'll probably think he can. There's elements of that he can successfully sell to the electorate in May.
I mean, one thing I would say is it's a budget that looks ripe for ripping up. I mean, if Labour get in, Anna Sauer's already said we'll have an emergency budget. So we'll just, we won't vote against this one because our aim is to be the government and introduce our own budget and change a lot of this.
So, but Labour might go for that reason the threshold to take that 100,000 out of that higher tax bracket.
It almost feels like the SNP might. I wonder if they get back in, he'll say, actually, that budget was set. Now we've got a firmer majority, or we've got new priorities. I just wonder whether this whole thing will end up in the bin.
All right, I think that wraps it up. Thanks to Mark and to Ben for joining me, and thanks also to Paul Black from the Records video team who produced this episode. You can listen to Planet Holyrood on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, or watch it on the Record YouTube channel. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and TikTok for the latest news and the best bits of the podcast.
We will never turn our back on a single Scot.
We've got to wrestle with those challenges.
This is the same nonsense we have heard time and time again.
This is our country. Let's fix it together.